My name is Erica, and this is the story of how my life turned upside down in ways I never could have imagined. For over a decade, I'd been happily married to my husband, James. We had what I thought was a rock-solid relationship built on trust and mutual respect. I worked as a remote French tutor, a job I enjoyed despite its modest pay. James came from a well-to-do family, but that never mattered to us. His parents, however, were a different story. Richard, my father-in-law, was an influential executive director at the local hospital. His wife, Margaret, busied herself with various charitable foundations. From the moment James introduced me, they made it clear they didn't approve of me. James had a brother, Michael, who was married to Emily. They had a 13-year-old daughter named Lily. Unable to have children of my own, I doted on my niece, often taking her for weekends and outings. Emily and I had become close over the years. During one of our coffee dates, she confided in me about the family's wealth. "Erica, you wouldn't believe the amount of property and money Richard and Margaret have given Michael and me," she whispered, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. "We're talking millions." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Millions? Where did they get that kind of money?" Emily shrugged. "I try not to think about it too much. But sometimes I joke that we're secret millionaires who can't touch our fortune." I laughed along, but a nagging feeling settled in my stomach. Something about the situation felt off, but I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on my family and my work. Life continued this way for years, a delicate balance of family dynamics and unspoken tensions. Then, tragedy struck. Michael and Emily were killed in a car accident, leaving Lily an orphan. The funeral was a somber affair, but something about Richard and Margaret's behavior struck me as odd. They seemed distracted, almost annoyed by the proceedings, as if they had more pressing matters on their minds than grieving their son. As we stood by the graveside, I overheard Margaret muttering to Richard, "We need to sort out the paperwork as soon as possible. This complicates everything." In the days that followed, I threw myself into caring for Lily. The poor girl was devastated, and I wanted to do everything I could to comfort her. After much discussion with James, I approached him with an idea. "Honey, what if we adopted Lily?" I suggested one evening. "She needs a stable home, and we love her so much already." James considered it for a moment before nodding. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's talk to my parents about it." The next day, James and I visited his parents' sprawling mansion to discuss our proposal to adopt Lily. As we sat in their opulent living room, I couldn't help but feel out of place among the antique furniture and priceless artworks. "Absolutely not," Margaret snapped as soon as we broached the subject. Her eyes narrowed as she glared at me. "Erica is not suitable to be a mother to our granddaughter. We will raise Lily ourselves." I was stunned by the vehemence in her voice. "But I've been a part of Lily's life since she was born," I protested. "James and I love her, and we can provide a stable home." Richard cleared his throat, his expression cold. "This isn't up for discussion. Lily stays with us." Margaret leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. "Besides, we all know what this is really about, don't we, Erica? You're just after Michael's money. How convenient that you can't have children of your own, and now you want to swoop in and become Lily's guardian. Did you think we wouldn't see through your little scheme?" As we left the house, I felt a mix of anger and sadness washing over me. "I can't believe they'd accuse me of something so horrible," I said to James as we drove home. He sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "I'm sorry, Erica. They're just protective of Lily. Give them time, they'll come around." But time didn't improve things. In fact, over the next few weeks, I noticed a change in James. He began staying late at work more often, always with some vague excuse about an important project. When he was home, he seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone and exchanging messages with someone. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table in silence, I couldn't take it anymore. "James, is everything okay? You've been so distant lately." He looked up from his phone, his expression hard. "It's nothing you need to concern yourself with," he snapped. I recoiled at his harsh tone. This wasn't like him at all. I'm your wife, I said softly. If something's bothering you, I want to help. Just drop it, Erica, he growled, pushing away from the table and storming out of the room. Hurt and confused, I tried to focus on the one bright spot in my life, my relationship with Lily. I visited her at Richard and Margaret's house as often as I could, helping her with her French lessons and providing a sympathetic ear for her grief. One afternoon, as Lily and I sat in the sunroom working on her conjugations, I overheard Richard and Margaret arguing in the next room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself straining to hear their heated exchange. We need to find a way to invalidate that trust fund, Richard hissed. $10 million, Margaret. $10 million that should be ours, not locked away for that girl. Margaret's voice was equally angry. Don't you think I know that? I've got the lawyers working on it, but it's not going to be easy. Michael made sure everything was ironclad before he died. I felt my blood run cold. They were talking about Lily's inheritance, the money Michael and Emily had set aside for their daughter's future. And they wanted to take it for themselves. That evening, I rushed home, prepared to tell James everything I'd overheard. But as soon as I walked through the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. James was sitting in the living room, a stack of papers on the coffee table in front of him. We need to talk, Erica, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. I approached James cautiously, the urgency of what I'd overheard momentarily forgotten. James, what's going on? He didn't meet my eyes as he pushed the stack of papers towards me. I want a divorce, Erica. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the sofa for support. What? Why? James, I don't understand. James finally looked up at me, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. I've met someone else. She's beautiful, intelligent, and from a good family. Everything you're not. Before I could respond, he pulled out his phone and showed me a picture. A stunning brunette smiled back at me, her arm draped possessively over James's shoulder. They looked happy, intimate. This is Amanda, James said. We've been seeing each other for a while now. I need you to sign these and leave. Tonight. Tears blurred my vision as I mechanically signed where he indicated. I felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out my insides and left me an empty shell. What about the house? Our stuff? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James waved dismissively. We'll sort out the division of property later. I don't have time for that now. Just pack what you need for a few days and leave the rest. I nodded numbly and headed to our bedroom, no, his bedroom now, to pack a bag. As I threw clothes haphazardly into a suitcase, I heard the front door open. James? Are you home, darling? Did you get rid of her? It was Margaret's voice, sickly sweet in a way I'd never heard before. Yes, Mom, James replied. Erica's packing now. She'll be gone within the hour. Margaret clapped her hands together. Excellent. You must bring Amanda to dinner tomorrow. Your father and I are dying to meet her properly. I retreated to the bedroom, feeling sick. How could they be so callous? So cruel? I finished packing in a daze, my mind reeling from everything that had happened. When I came downstairs with my suitcase, Margaret was still there. She didn't bother to hide her triumphant smile. Erica, dear, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I'm so sorry things didn't work out between you and James. Besides, don't bother coming around to see Lily anymore. It's best if you make a clean break. With those final, cutting words ringing in my ears, I stepped out into the night. The door closed behind me with a finality that seemed to echo the end of my married life. I found myself at a nearby hotel, checking in for the night in a fog of disbelief and pain. As I lay in the impersonal hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, I tried to make sense of how my life had fallen apart so quickly. The next morning, operating on autopilot, I found a small apartment to rent. It was nothing like the home I'd shared with James, but it would do. I threw myself into my work, teaching French lessons online from morning till night, anything to keep my mind occupied. A week after moving into my new apartment, my phone rang. It was Lily. My heart leapt at the sound of her voice. "Aunt Erica," she said hesitantly. "Are you okay? Grandma said you and Uncle James split up." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm okay, sweetheart. These things happen sometimes. How are you doing?" As we chatted, Lily hesitantly told me about James bringing his new girlfriend to dinner. "She's pretty," Lily said. "But she's not as nice as you. I don't like her." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I changed the subject, asking about her school and her friends. But as we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Lily seemed nervous, on edge. Over the next few weeks, I tried to establish a new normal. One evening, as I was grading papers, my phone buzzed with a message from Lily. "Aunt Erica, I'm scared. Can we talk?" Alarmed, I immediately called her back. When she answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Aunt Erica, weird things are happening here." "What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked, concern flooding through me. Lily hesitated before continuing. "There are always these strange people coming to the house. They argue with Grandpa and Grandma a lot. They talk about money and something called a trust fund. It sounds like Grandpa and Grandma owe them something." My blood ran cold as I remembered the conversation I'd overheard about Lily's inheritance. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Lily, honey, I want you to be very careful, okay? Don't let anyone know you're telling me this." "I won't," she promised. "I've been recording some of their conversations on my phone. And I kind of got into Grandpa's computer and copied some files." I was shocked by her resourcefulness. "Lily, that's very clever, but also very dangerous. You need to be careful." The next day, I received an email from Lily. It contained audio files, photos, and documents she'd managed to gather. With shaking hands, I began to go through the material. What I discovered left me reeling. The audio recordings captured heated arguments between Richard and various individuals, all demanding repayment of large sums of money. The photos showed clandestine meetings in dimly lit rooms, with Richard handing over envelopes to shady-looking characters. But it was the documents that truly horrified me. Spreadsheets detailing the production and distribution of counterfeit medicines. Falsified lab reports. Forged prescriptions. It was all there in black and white. As I delved deeper into the files, I uncovered the true extent of the operation. Richard had set up a fictitious pharmaceutical company, using it to supply counterfeit drugs to pharmacies and clinics. Even worse, he was using these fake medicines in his own hospital, bribing doctors to cover up the deception. My hand shook as I closed my laptop. What should I do with this information? Going to the police seemed like the obvious answer, but I hesitated. What if James was involved? And what about Lily? She was living in that house, surrounded by these dangerous people. As night fell, I made a decision. Despite everything that had happened, I needed to talk to James. He deserved to know what his father was doing. I picked up my phone and dialed his number, my heart pounding. After several rings, he answered. "Erica?" His voice was confused, wary. "Why are you calling?" "James, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about your father. There's something you need to know." He was silent for a few seconds, and then he asked me to meet. I agreed, and James gave me an address, a small cafe on the outskirts of town. As I drove there, my emotions were in turmoil. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. James was sitting in a corner booth, looking haggard and older than I remembered. As I slid into the seat across from him, I noticed dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his shoulders that I'd never seen before. "Erica," he began, his voice low, "I've been working with the police for months. We're building a case against my father and his entire operation." I stared at him, stunned. "What? But, the divorce? Amanda?" James ran a hand through his hair. It was all part of the cover. I needed to distance myself from you, to keep you safe. Amanda is an undercover officer. We needed a way to get her into the family circle without suspicion. My head was spinning. So, our marriage, it wasn't real? No, Erica, James said, reaching across the table to take my hand. Our marriage was the only real thing in all of this. I love you. I've always loved you. Pushing you away was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Tears welled up in my eyes as relief and anger warred within me. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. I couldn't risk it, James said, his voice pained. My father's network is vast. If there was even a hint that you knew something, you'd be in danger. I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to you. As James continued to explain, I learned the full extent of the investigation. It wasn't just Richard involved, there were corrupt doctors, pharmacists, and even government officials implicated. The case was massive, with potential ramifications that reached far beyond our small town. But what about Lily? I asked, suddenly remembering my niece's fear. She's living in that house, James. She's scared. James's face darkened. I know. We're working on a way to get her out safely. But it's complicated. We talked late into the night. When we finally parted ways, James pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through, he whispered. When this is all over, I promise I'll make it up to you. I clung to him, savoring the feeling of being in his arms again. But as I drove home, a nagging worry settled in my stomach. Despite James's assurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was in immediate danger. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the shrill ring of my phone. Lily's name flashed on the screen, and my heart raced as I answered. Aunt Erica. Lily's voice was a panicked whisper. They're packing. They keep saying they need to get out before it's too late. I sat bolt upright, fully alert now. Lily, listen to me carefully. Are you safe right now? Can they hear you? I'm hiding in my closet, she replied. But I don't know how long before they. Suddenly, there was a commotion on the other end of the line. I heard Lily gasp, followed by the muffled sound of a struggle. Lily? Lily! I shouted into the phone, but the line went dead. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I threw on some clothes and rushed out of my apartment. I knew I should call James or the police, but there was no time. When I arrived at the house, I saw frantic activity through the windows. Shadows moved back and forth, and I could hear raised voices inside. Taking a deep breath, I approached the front door and rang the bell. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then, the door swung open, revealing Richard's surprised face. Erica, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice strained. I plastered on a fake smile. I left some of my things here when I moved out. I was hoping I could collect them. Richard's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but before he could respond, I heard Lily's voice from inside the house. Aunt Erica, help me. Without hesitation, I pushed past Richard and ran into the house. The scene that greeted me was chaos. Suitcases were strewn about, drawers left open, papers scattered everywhere. Margaret stood in the living room, gripping Lily's arm tightly. Let her go, I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. What happened next was a blur. Richard lunged at me, but years of yoga had made me quicker than he expected. I dodged his grasp and made a dash for Lily. Margaret, in her surprise, loosened her grip, and Lily broke free, running towards me. We almost made it to the door when I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head. Richard had grabbed a heavy bookend and struck me. I stumbled, my vision blurring, but I managed to push Lily towards the door. Run, Lily! Get help! I shouted as I fell to my knees. The last thing I saw was Lily's terrified face as she ran out the door. Then, darkness engulfed me. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I came to, I found myself bound to a chair in what looked like Richard's study. My head throbbed, and I could feel something warm trickling down my neck, blood. Richard paced the room, running his hands through his hair. We need to leave now. Before the police arrive. What about her? Margaret gestured towards me. Richard's eyes met mine, and I saw a coldness there that chilled me to the bone. We can't leave any loose ends. Suddenly, we heard the distant wail of police sirens. Richard and Margaret froze, panic etched on their faces. It's too late, Richard muttered. We need to run, now. As they rushed to grab their belongings, I struggled against my bonds. The sirens grew louder, and I heard car doors slamming outside. Richard and Margaret were shouting at each other now, their carefully constructed facade crumbling in the face of imminent arrest. Just as I felt the ropes loosen, the study door burst open. James rushed in, followed by several police officers. Erica, he cried, running to my side and quickly untying me. As the police handcuffed Richard and Margaret, reading them their rights, James pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry, he whispered. When Lily called me, I came as fast as I could. I sagged against him, relief washing over me. Lily? Is she safe? James nodded. She's outside with a social worker. She's shaken up, but she's okay. The next few days passed in a blur of police statements, medical examinations, and sleepless nights. I was diagnosed with a mild concussion from Richard's attack, but the doctors assured me I would recover fully. As I sat in the hospital bed, James by my side, we watched the news unfold on the small television in the corner of the room. The arrest of Richard, a prominent figure in our community, had sparked a media frenzy. Headlines screamed about the counterfeit drug king and the hospital of horrors. The scale of this operation is unprecedented, a grim-faced police chief announced at a press conference. We're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in damages, and countless lives put at risk. As we were listening to the news, reliving the traumatic events, a knock at the door interrupted us. A tall, serious-looking woman in a suit entered the room. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, she said, her voice crisp and professional. I'm Detective Laura Chen. I'm leading the investigation into your father's operation. I was hoping I could ask you both a few questions. Over the next hour, we recounted everything we knew. James explained his involvement with the police investigation, while I shared the information Lily had gathered and the events leading up to my confrontation with Richard and Margaret. Detective Chen listened intently, taking notes. When we finished, she looked at us with a mix of admiration and concern. You've both been through a lot, she said. And I'm afraid it's not over yet. The trial is going to be long and difficult. Are you prepared for that? James and I exchanged a look. We'll do whatever it takes to see justice done, I said firmly. As Detective Chen left, promising to keep us updated on the case, another visitor arrived, Lily, accompanied by her social worker. Aunt Erica, she cried, rushing to my bedside and throwing her arms around me. I was so scared. I thought they were going to hurt you. I held her tight, feeling her small body shake with sobs. It's okay, sweetheart. You were so brave. You saved us all. But we have another long battle ahead of us. And long it was. The case dragged on for over 2 years, making headlines across the country. As I recovered and we tried to rebuild our lives, the trial loomed over everything. Finally, after months of testimony and mountains of evidence, the verdict came in. Richard and Margaret were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. All their assets, including the trust fund they had set up for Lily, were confiscated as proceeds of crime. As we left the courthouse after the sentencing, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? So many lives had been destroyed, including those of people I had once considered family. After the dust settled from the trial, James and I focused on rebuilding our lives. The most important part of that was Lily. We'd grown so close during the ordeal, and now it was time to make it official. The adoption process was a whirlwind of paperwork and interviews, but finally, we stood before a judge who declared us Lily's legal guardians. As we left the courthouse, Lily between us holding both our hands, I felt a surge of emotion. "We did it," I whispered to James, tears in my eyes. He squeezed my hand. "We're a real family now." With guardianship came the responsibility of managing Lily's inheritance from her parents. It was a daunting task, but we were determined to do right by her. "What do you think about renting out the house?" James suggested one evening as we pored over financial documents. I nodded. "Good idea. We can put the rent money into a savings account for her college fund." We threw ourselves into the task, finding reliable tenants and setting up a separate account for Lily's future. It felt good to be planning for her future, to be giving her the stability she deserved after everything she'd been through. As we settled into our new normal, James approached me one night with a nervous energy about him. "Erica," he began, taking my hands in his. "These past few years, they've been hell. But they've also shown me how strong we are together. I was wondering, would you marry me again?" I laughed, tears springing to my eyes. "Are you kidding? Of course I will." We decided on a small ceremony, just close friends and family. The day arrived, bright and clear. As I slipped on my bright blue dress, a color of hope and new beginnings, I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Lily knocked on the door, already in her bridesmaid dress. "Aunt Erica? You look like a princess." I twirled for her, feeling light and happy. "And you look absolutely beautiful. Are you ready to go?" She nodded eagerly, taking my hand. As we walked down the aisle together, I saw James waiting for me, his eyes shining with love. It felt like our first wedding all over again, but better, because now we knew what we could overcome together. The ceremony was simple, but beautiful. As we exchanged vows, I looked out at our small gathering of loved ones, at Lily beaming beside us, and I knew that this was exactly where I was meant to be. At the reception, James pulled me close for our first dance. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Harrison again?" he murmured in my ear. I grinned up at him. "Even better than the first time." Later, as I watched Lily twirling on the dance floor with her friends, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Our path hadn't been easy, but we'd made it through. We were stronger for it. The next week, I was back at work, tutoring my French students online. Life had returned to a kind of normal, but it was a new normal, one filled with love, laughter, and the joy of our little family.